Hi guys, you're welcome to MJ Apparel tutorial, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how I made this beautiful overlap pencil dress with pleated ruffle. It is super easy to make, and if you want to see how I achieved this beautiful dress here, then please watch till the end. And if this is your first time on our channel, please don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you get notified whenever we post a new video, and also don't forget to like, share and also drop a comment. I'm going to be using this fabric for today's tutorial. So the first thing I'll go ahead to do is to draft the upper bodice of the gown using my pattern paper, after which I'll transfer it to the fabric. So first you draw a straight horizontal line which will serve as the shoulder line. After drawing the horizontal line, next insert the vertical measurement, which is the shoulder to the bust point, shoulder to the waist. So I'm going to be marking my shoulder to the bust point and shoulder to the waist. After that, you draw a straight horizontal line and label. Next, insert the shoulder measurement on the shoulder line. The shoulder measurement I'm working with is 14 divided by 2 is 7 inch. I'm going to be marking the 7 inch at this point. After marking the 7 inch, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. Then from this point, I'll mark the armhole depth, which is 7.5. Next, I'll connect the points together using a straight line, and I will label that part the chest line. Next, insert the neck width and the neck depth for the gown. I'll be using a neck width of 3.5 for both the front and the back, and I'll be using a neck depth of 1.5 for the back. We'll be drafting the back neckline first, and we'll be drafting that of the front as we progress in the tutorial. After connecting the neckline, next you draw the shoulder slope. After drawing the shoulder slope, the next thing to do is to take out the waist dart, and in doing that I'm going to be inserting half of the nipple to nipple measurement at this point. My nipple to nipple measurement is 7.75 divided by 2 is 3.8. I'll mark it at this point and draw a straight vertical line. Next, I'm going to be marking a dart of 0.5 inch on both sides, after which I'll connect it to the bust point line using a straight line. After drawing the dart, the next thing to do is to insert your bust circumference on the chest line and your waist measurements on the half length line. So the bust I'm working with is 37 divided by 4 is 9.5, and the waist I'm working with is 34 divided by 4 is 8.5. I'm going to be marking the 8.5 plus the 1 inch for the dark we took. Next, I'll connect the chest line to the waistline using a straight line. Next, draw the armhole for the front and back of the upper part of the gown. So I have a detailed video on how to draft a basic bodice. I'll be dropping the link to that video in the comment section so you can watch and learn how to draft a basic bodice if you don't know how to do that. This is what it should look like after drafting. Next, cut it out, and we'll be using this pattern to cut out the upper part of the gown. Next, place your fabric on fold. When folding your fabric, you use your bust divided by 4 plus 3 inch. The 3 inch is for the zipper allowance and for the sewing allowance. That's you use 1.5 for zipper allowance and 1.5 for the sewing allowance. Next, you place your pattern paper on your fabric this way. Then you mark out your 1.5 inch zipper allowance. Then you connect with a straight line. After connecting with a straight line, you place your pattern paper on the line you just drew this way. Then you secure the pattern paper using your office pin so it doesn't shift while cutting. The next thing you will do is to add your sewing allowance on the shoulder, on the half length, and also on the side of the gown. After doing that, you go ahead to cut it out. So just watch what I'm doing closely and follow the same process. After cutting, this is what the back is going to look like. I'll go ahead to slash the center back open. The next thing we're going to go ahead to do is to use this same pattern paper to draft out the front. So I'm going to be folding my fabric again to do that. So place your fabric on fold for the front. Because we are cutting an overlap dress, we'll be cutting the two sides at the same time. Next, you place your pattern paper on the fabric. When folding your fabric, the amount of fabric you have to fold is half of your bust measurement. So what you should have at this point should be half of your bust measurement. I'm cutting an overlap dress, so I'll be cutting the two sides together. That is why I'm cutting on fold. Next, secure your pattern paper with the fabric using your office pin so it doesn't move while cutting. After securing your paper, the next thing to do is to extend what you have on the waistline. You draw a straight line like this on the waistline. After drawing the straight line on the waistline, the next thing to do is to measure what you have on the waistline to this other part, starting from the center this way. So here I have 9.5. I'm going to be measuring the same 9.5 at this point, after which I'll go ahead to mark it. After marking it, the next thing to do is to determine the neck depth of the front. So you are making an overlap dress. The opening here depends on how you want it to be. So I'm going to be using 8 inch for the neck depth of the overlap dress we are making. After marking the 8 inch, the next thing I'm going to be doing is to connect from my shoulder width to that 8 inch mark I have. You can decide to draw a straight line to make it a V neckline, or you can decide to use a slight curve. So I'm going to be using a slight curve to do that this way. Sorry, my chalk did not really come out on the pattern paper, but this is what you should do. So the next thing to do is to go up by 2 inch on the waistline. That is at the point where the extension stop. You go up by 2 inch and mark. After marking the point, you draw a straight line this way. Then the next thing you are going to do is to connect to the center front using a curve like this. So you connect from that 2 inch you went up by to the neck depth using a slight curve like this. So this is for the overlap. So just watch what I'm doing and follow the same process. Sorry, my chalk didn't really come out well at this point, but you should have a slight curve at this part of the gown. So the next thing to do is to take out your sewing allowance on the side, on the shoulder, and also on the half length. After doing that, you go ahead to cut it out. So just watch what I'm doing and follow suit. After cutting it out, this is what it's going to look like after cutting it out. So the next thing to do is to notch the center of the overlap dress so that when it comes to sewing, you will know how to place it well. So I'm just going to do that now. After doing that, I'll open it up for you to see what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to look like when it's being open. Next, we'll go over to draft the skirt part of the gown. Here I have my fabric on fold for the skirt part of the gown we are making, and when folding, you fold using your hip divided by 4 plus your sewing allowance. We'll be cutting the front of the skirt first. So next, I'm going to be securing with my pin. After securing with my pin, I'll be inserting the measurement. So remember, we've already taken out 16 inch from the gown, and the full length of the gown I'm making is 43 inch, and the gown has a ruffle. So I'm going to be using 10 inch for the ruffle, which means I'll be left with 33 inch. And also, I've already used 16 inch for the upper part of the gown. So what I have left now for the skirt part is 17 inch. So I'm going to be using 17 inch for the skirt part, then plus 1 inch sewing allowance. So for the lower part of the gown, I'm going to be using 17 inch. So next, I'll go ahead to insert my vertical measurement and my hip and waist circumference. So next, I'll be placing my vertical measurement, and here I'm starting from 16 inch. Remember, we've used 16 inch for the upper part, so I place my tape starting from the 16 inch, and I'm going to be marking the full length, which is 33 plus 1 inch sewing allowance, which is 34. So I'm going to be marking a straight horizontal line at that point. Next, insert the quarter of your waist measurement. So I'm using the waist measurement of 34 divided by 4 is 8.5 plus 1 inch for that. I'm going to be marking it at that point. After marking the waist circumference, the next I'm going to be doing is to insert my hip depth. So the hip depth from the shoulder to the hip depth, I'm using 24 inch. So I'm going to be marking it at this point, after which I will insert my hip circumference, which is 37 divided by 4, which is 9.75. After inserting the hip circumference measurement on the hip depth line, the next thing to do is to go to the hem and insert your measurement. And in doing that, I'm going to be minusing 1 inch from my hip measurement because we are making a pencil gown. You can decide to minus 1 or 1.5 inch depending on how penciled you want the gown to be. After marking it, next I'll connect the points together using my ruler. After that, I'll add my sewing allowance of 1.5 inch all the way down. So whatever sewing allowance you added to the upper part of the gown, you'll be adding the same sewing allowance on the lower part of the gown also. After adding my sewing allowance, the next thing I'll go ahead to do is to cut it out. This is what we'll be having after cutting the gown. Next, I'll go ahead to use this to cut the back of the gown. So I've gone ahead to cut the back using the front. The front and the back are basically the same. All you need to do is just add your zipper allowance at the center back. So here I have the lower part of the gown and here I have the upper part of the gown. The next thing I'm going to do is to use these patterns to cut the lining for the gown. But if you are not using a lining, you can skip this process. I've gone ahead to cut out the lining using my fabric, and this is what we have after doing that. So now we are going to go into the sewing proper. So the first thing I'll go ahead to do is to sew out the darts. I'm going to go over my sewing machine to sew out the darts for the main fabric and for the lining separately. After doing that, I'll come back to show you the next step. After sewing out the darts, this is what we have. I did the same thing for the upper part and also for the skirt part of the gown. So the next thing we are going to go ahead to do is to close up the neckline for the front and the back of the gown we are making. And in doing that, I'm going to be placing my fabric, the good face, facing the good face of the fabric, after which I'll go ahead to close up this part of the gown and also the side. I'll be doing the same thing for the back of the gown also. So if you're not using a lining to finish up your dress, you go ahead to use your bias to finish up the neckline for both the front and the back. I'll also go ahead to also close up the sides of the skirt and I'll also give it a good press. After doing that, I'll come back to show you the next step. So after closing the side, this is what we have. Here I have the skirt. I closed up the sides of the skirt, after which I turned it and gave it a good press. So this is the back part of the skirt, and here we have the front part of the skirt. Here we have the back of the gown. I've also turned the neck and ironed it, and here we have the front of the gown. So the next thing we are going to go ahead to do is to join the front together. So remember, we notch the center part while drafting, so you place your fabric this way, making sure the notch part meet together, then you can go ahead to close it up. After closing it up, I'll also go ahead to attach the lower part of the gown to the upper part of the gown, and I will sew the two parts together. I'll also be doing the same thing for the back. I will join the lower part of the back to the upper part. I'll close it up and also fix the zipper to the gown. After doing that, I'll come back to show you the next step. After joining the lower part of the gown to the upper part of the gown, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what the overlap of the gown is looking like. So I've gone ahead to do the same thing for the back. I've joined the lower part of the gown to the upper part of the back of the gown together, and I've also fixed the zipper of the gown. So the next thing we are going to go ahead to do is to join the front of the gown to the back of the gown. So I'll go over my sewing machine to join the shoulders of the gown, and I'll also close up the right side of the gown. So just take note of this. You are closing up just one part of the gown, which is the right part of the gown, because you are going to be attaching the ruffle to the left part of the gown. I'll quickly do that and come back to show you the next step. So I've gone ahead to turn the shoulders of the gown, and I've also gone ahead to close up one side of the gown. So the next thing I'll go ahead to do is to turn the gown to the good face. So I've gone ahead to turn it to the good face, and I've also given it a good press. As you can see, this part of the gown is closed while the other part of the gown is still open because we'll be fixing our ruffle to this part of the gown. The next thing I'm going to go ahead to do is to take out my sewing allowance. So the sewing allowance I'm working with is 1.25. I'm going to be marking the sewing allowance, and after which I'll connect the points together. After marking the sewing allowance, you're going to be coming up by 6 to 7 inch. Then you draw a slight curve like you see me doing, because we are going to be attaching the ruffle following this curve like this. I'll be stopping 3 inch before this part, so you go in by 3 inch at this part and mark. So we are going to be attaching the ruffle from the waist round down to this point. So we fix it this way, following this curve, then we stop at this point we just marked. The next thing to do is to measure what you have around this part, so you know the length of the ruffle you are going to be cutting. So I'm measuring all the way down to the point where I marked. So here I have 49 inch. So to know the amount of ruffle you have to cut, you can decide to cut times 3 or times 4 of the length you have, depending on how full you want the ruffle to be. So here I have the strip cut out. The width of the strip is 10 inch, and I've also gone ahead to fold this part of the strip. This part is folded while this part is not folded, and I've also folded this part. So the length of the strip depends on how much fabric you have and how full you want the ruffle to be. So I'll be attaching this to the gown. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is to go ahead to attach the ruffle following this curve. So when placing your ruffle, you make sure that the good face of your fabric is facing the good face of the gown. Then you start pleating from the waistline. You can decide to run a gather, you can decide to pleat it, but I'm going to be pleating it following the sewing allowance I have drawn. This is what I'm going to be doing on my sewing machine. So I'm going to pin it. After pinning it, I'll go over my sewing machine to sew it. So you're going to be pleating and sewing at the same time, and you're going to be sewing it all the way around to the point we marked at the back of the gown. So I'll go over my sewing machine to do that. After doing that, I'll come back to show you the next step. So after sewing the ruffle to the gown, this is what it is going to look like. As you can see, I followed the curve to bring out the beauty of the gown, and I sew it round down to this point where we marked. This is what you should do. So the next thing I'll go ahead to do is to close up this side that is still open. So I'm going to turn my gown to the wrong side. After turning to the wrong side, I'll push the ruffle inward this way. Then I'll go ahead to close up the side of the gown. After doing that, I'll come back to show you the next step. So I've gone ahead to close up the side of the gown, and this is what it's going to look like after closing. When closing, close with your sewing allowance. As you can see, we still have some parts without the ruffle. So what I'm going to go ahead to do is to use this remaining ruffle I have here. I'm going to go ahead to pleat it down to this point. So I'll go over my sewing machine to pleat, to cover up this remaining part I have opened here. After doing that, I'll come back to show you the next step. So I'm going ahead to close up the lower part of the gown, and this is what it's going to look like after closing it up. Next, I'll turn it to the good face so you see what it looks like on the other part of the gown. So this is what the lower part of the gown is going to look like. As you can see, it's looking beautiful already, and this is what the upper part is going to look like. I'm going to go ahead to attach a sleeve to the gown, after which I'll show you the final result of the gown. So here we have the final look of the gown. As you can see, it looking beautiful and it came out so nice. You can go ahead to try yours. And also, if this video was helpful to you, if you are yet to subscribe, please click on the subscribe button, like, and also drop a comment. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial.